So I did some math, and depending on how you count it, I have produced somewhere between 100 kilos and a ton of aluminum for the state with my bottle collecting. Now, that's a lot of aluminum, especially considering that every can is about 15 grams. So if I have 15 grams a can to produce, the average math pointed at 300 kilos during my homelessness. That is a lot of cans. That is an ungodly amount of cans. And I'm just thinking, how many miles have I walked to do this? And wow. I mean, one can is around 15 grams, depending on how you count it. It's flickering. Windows is not what it used to be. So, oh God, that is ugly. You need to get your act straight, Windows. So it's about 15 grams. And I collected about €3 every day because I bought one can of energy drinks and one pack of meatballs a minimum. And if half of the stuff I collected were cans and half of them were bottles, which is about right, we could go with about 8 cans per day. So that's about 43 kilos a year, roughly. And I was homeless for roughly 7 years, and this comes out to roughly 300 kilos or 300,000 grams. So this has been done. I need something else to do. I was just thinking if I add aluminum mine to my curriculum vitae, my job application, I write that I mined aluminum in the suburbs of Scandinavia and produced about 300 kilos. That would be something to put in the CV. But on a more serious note, there are some interesting news. Evidently, we are developing a warp drive rather fast. There seems to be a development in the Alkibiri warp drive, which points to I shouldn't keep this up unless I need to talk to these guys because it's radioactive. But it points to warp drive being perhaps possible in this century for something larger than a micro drone. But considering that when Star Trek first came around, they had those handheld scanner devices that they called pads. And nobody expected that technology to be available like 20, 30 years later as a full technical invention, not just like something that you see in a rare TV interview with a billionaire, but something that actually came around and was available, the iPad and iPhones and what have you. And a lot of the technology we see in science fiction, once it's been charted properly in science fiction, turns out to be easier than we thought it would be. So to me, it kind of looks like we might very well be able to see an actual warp drive before the end of this century. A lot of the alt people that I've been talking to have been talking about the warp drive lately and how it's advancing and how the technology is advancing. And the fact that they're using what alternative people used to call 0 point energy, which is now being called Casimir effect, was first talked about as zero point energy. And I remember how it was being discussed by scientists in the alt community. And it was openly discussed to be exactly as Casimir effect was later made to be. So it's not just a random invention of the scientists. It's what it was clearly in the alt community first. Like warp drive is in the alt community first, and pads were in the alt community first. But now it looks like we might reasonably be expected to have a functional warp drive sometime within this century. And looking at how science fiction thinks we will go from, or rather, how long it will take for an average civilization to go from nuclear and coal to warp energy. They're usually talking about 100 to 200 years from the invention of large-scale nuclear power to the invention of large-scale warp power. They're usually talking about 100 to 200 years, regardless of what source we discuss. They're usually talking about roughly that time. So it's looking like we might very well get the thing within 200 years, or 200 years from the development of nuclear power. So if we go from 30s and 40s, perhaps even let's go with 1940s, then 100 years will be 2040, and getting to warp technology in 100 years from the invention of nuclear power is hard, but it's not impossible. But 200 years, which would be 2140, is late, according to most science fiction. They usually chart it to be perhaps 200 years from the invention of nuclear power. And they're usually talking about 50-ish years from the invention of fusion power as a energy source. They're usually talking roughly that. And while I am involved in a great deal of scientific research regarding various weird topics, the invention of warp drive is not one where I am strongly involved. So I'm looking at this as an outsider. If we look at something like commercial fusion power or miniature nuclear reactors and stuff like that, then yeah, I'm involved. But looking at warp drive is not something that I'm all that aware and all that comfortable with. It is not something I am studying much. Warp as a mechanical invention should not be studied by people who are in the spirit of the warp, because, if I were to study warp drive, I'd actually study Geller fields first, but that's just me. So we're looking at warp drive perhaps within 100 years, and with the fact that our technology seems to advance far quicker than we think, we might very well get it within the current generation's lifespan. The millennials and Gen Z and whatever, their lifespan seems to be within range of this. Seems like if we're lucky, we might see some micro-scale experiments which prove that it is theoretically possible using the Casimir effect within 10 years, and from that, perhaps some sort of large experiment within 30 years. But it looks like 10 years for miniaturized experiments could be feasible. Right now we have theoretical and mathematical basis for it. It does seem to be at least somewhat possible. It would be very interesting. because even with our most powerful rockets, going to Mars is still like half a year to 2 years journey, while with even reasonable warp drive, and I'm not talking about like faster than light, I'm talking about the ability to actually like increase your speed in space with a reasonable amount, then we could be talking about it actually being feasible to live on Mars or something similar, which is not currently with the rocket technology very much possible. And I've been keeping an eye on the fight against flu that we've had lately, the attempt to get flu removed as a symptom from the totality of humanity, which is clearly what's going on here. And I've concluded that while it is possible to push this flu in any form, just, flu, out of the human spirit and keep it out, the virus itself, as kind of seems to be the norm with these deadly things, is one that is protecting us from an even deadlier thing, which is roughly what I'm expecting to see here when we study the medical field. That whenever we like eliminate a disease, it turns out that will just provoke a worse disease. That seems to be the trend. So it seems to me like if we do in fact remove the flu, we will get the kinds of personality alterations and, let's just say, death scenarios that cause a greater amount of suffering than if we have the flu. So kind of like what we were expecting. So the same is true of nearly every disease universally. So that if we remove the disease, we will end up with a worse disease, which is why I think they ought not be called diseases, but that's neither here nor there. It is indeed a fairly high probability that this, let's call it flu war, is one that we ought not focus on. It feels like to me that it is worse to remove the ability of humans to react to diseases and discomfort in a way that is, I wouldn't say large scale human or like within the community, but that is kind of like its thing. So it seems like remove the flu and you get a sudden massive increase in the risk of heart attack. And that is like, if you remove the fatalities of 500,000 that we get from flu every year, the increased inability to properly live causes a greater death rate. That's what I'm looking at. And it is roughly as we initially thought that it would happen, because we were kind of thinking that if we follow the norm of eliminating disease, then we will probably get a bad outcome. That is one of the things where it does indeed look like caution is the better course. Anybody who's ever had the flu knows the feeling of warm fuzz in your heart, the kind of like tired fuzz in your heart. If we remove that ability, then the heart will be under greater pressure, and that will cause the heart problems, which cause the greater death rate. So, like with a lot of diseases, not all of them, but a lot of diseases, outright removing them is not recommended. That's roughly what we have found out. So, I have been trying to, for a few days now, to call off the attempt to remove flu, which is what a lot of people are talking about because after that they're going to go for cancer. And I have some amount of fear as to what will happen if you try to use the same method that you used to remove the flu against the cancer and what will happen in that case. So I'm trying to get to a point where disease isn't eliminated, it's understood. It's known as what it does and what needs to be done about it. And it feels to me like most of the diseases that we have as humanity are better to be not eliminated as a blanket, but fought when necessary, perhaps resisted. Perhaps the best course of fighting against the flu isn't a vaccine that causes the flu to vanish, but perhaps chicken soup. Perhaps that is what we ought to be looking at.
Finisher. Yeah, you know what I mean.
My first impression from re-allowing flu into my system is one that I feel distinctly more balanced. The rather severe heart pains that I was having that felt like literally somebody was taking a chunk out of my heart. It felt like a single strong line of darkness ascending from below and then taking a bite of my heart and then descending back. Oh, sorry. That's what it felt like. That symptom has near completely vanished as soon as I re-allowed flu. So it makes me think that diseases, as all science talked about, have their purpose. They're not just annoyances, which just goes to prove how childish we are as a species. Chicken soup instead of vaccines. And perhaps before we start dealing with human illnesses as if we're farming cattle using large scale antibiotics and such, we ought to make sure that everybody has access to clean drinking water, food, shelter, so on, sufficient rest, and all that. So perhaps it might be appropriate to focus on certain larger scale humanitarian works than simply the work of vaccination programs. It is, it feels like the increase in vaccination programs cause pain to the heart. That is what it feels like to me. And I cannot say that the attempt to remove flu as we have charted it out with these technologies, is a smart course to take. Reality is that flu kills 500,000 people a year, infects perhaps 10 million to 100 million a year, while the first variant of another disease that came around as soon as we blocked flu killed around 3 million. So it would be interesting to see if there is a large scale correlation of every time we do a large scale vaccination campaign somewhere, if there is an increase in another disease. And if that is indeed an eternal run back and forth with no reality to it. So my first feel after attempting this return of allowance for people to do this and for flu to do this, if the resulting thing is as it was for me, then I would say that it is perhaps not as smart as we might think to attack disease as we've been attacking it. There might be another path that is being overlooked, and have something of a hunch that it might be the chicken soup path. Because it seems like diseases appear when you are under a certain kind of hostile stress. And it is the reaction of your body to the stress to produce the disease. And it feels like, but I am not yet sure. If I were sure, I would not be doing any discussion on it. I would simply be carrying out the path. But I am not sure. It feels like this might be done the wrong way. We'll see. We'll see. But in short, the sense of getting stabbed or bitten from the heart has completely or near completely vanished as soon as I allowed flu back into my field. It feels like it does, like when the bullet of death is flying towards you, it shatters the bullet into many small fragments, and it feels like kind of like a fluff of disease instead of a singular bullet or stab or something of that line. Consider it interesting that as soon as I allowed flu back, that is the thing I got, that heart pains vanished instantly. So I know that there is a lot of desire for people to remove all these harmful things and such, but it isn't that simple. It just isn't. But I hope we can get something out of this. It seems like flu is almost like when you have a system of adults interacting and there are children observing the interactions, they get the flu because they are like not capable of reacting and understanding properly to what they're seeing. But if we remove the flu and push them so that they, as humans are a child species to the aliens, which brings us to the Floater War, if we push it to a place where we can deal with, interact with these adult civilizations, it seems like they are able to and willing to interact in that way, but that the mind or psyche or soul that humans have is not ready for it. So our choice is to either play the part of the adult and get into the situations that would be normal for humans, things like men in black, alien trading, alien things, whatever. But we are so immature as a species that it causes more harm than to simply be ignored by them. I mean, it is less harmful, it seems, to simply be ignored by them, occasionally run over in some kind of war that we have no ability to grasp the significance or meaning of, and simply float on by as if like we're krill in the ocean of whales, than to get the whales to truly consider us equals and then treat us like one of them, because the cost of that level of interaction is greater than just admitting that we are not ready as a species to tolerate aliens. Because after we started the floater interaction, in my opinion, there is zero possibility for us to deny that the aliens responded. We got the Tic Tacs, we got the Arujibo, we got the Oumuamua, we got all the stuff that is part and parcel of how an alien civilization would contact us. But we are not ready. It is better to be so small that they walk all over us without killing us than it is for them to notice us and start to treat us like an ant eater would an ant hill. It's perhaps better to be too small to be cared about than to race too fast and explode. Perhaps this rather than being taken into the adult circles and playing poker with them. That is what it looks like. Please send me your toes. No. So I will be keeping an eye on the heart pains and see if they truly have vanished. If so, it looks like it is indeed the way to go.
Y-class freighter. Maximum speed warp 1.8. Crew complement 23.
Not counting newborn babies. Ensign? I grew up on a J class, a little smaller, but the same basic design. And one thing I can tell you is that at warp 1.8, you got a lot of time on your hands between ports. That's how my parents wound up with me.
Do you have any helpful information on this vessel beyond its recreational activities.
For example, what kind of weapons they carry?
Well, typically nothing more than a low-yield plasma cannon, but most freight haulers would have upgraded the first chance they got.
Why's that?
Think about it. You're a dozen light years from home with 20 kilotons of dilithium ore in your hold, armed with nothing but a pop gun for shooting oncoming meteors. What would you do?
That's the spirit's view on what would happen if we switch from attempting this to actually doing this. There would be a big boom boom. If we go from, this might not be the right way to do it, to switching everybody to do it the same way. The Emperor has spoken. So perhaps we should take the answer we have gotten from the aliens some years ago when we were studying this seriously, where they said, roughly speaking, that the rule is that you cannot, or rather should not, talk to what we are called child civilizations until they have the ability to travel to your homeworld. Once you send a manned mission to their homeworld or one of their inhabited star systems, then you are in a point where you can be talked to. Before that, it does seem like it would be inappropriate. That is the general mood that I have gotten when I have asked about this. Perhaps that is what we should focus on. Oh.
Imagine for a moment the unimaginable happened. A major city is hit by a nuclear weapon.
Or a
Now,
meteorite.
no number could account for all the devastation that would result. But we can't put a number on the death. At least we can make an educated guess based on our understanding of what nuclear blasts do to city
Anywhere
structures.
between 1 trillion and 100 trillion.
45. But here we'll use an 800 kiloton warhead, a relatively large bomb in today's arsenals, and 100 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima.
Well, no. Looks like 25.
Upon detonation, a fireball as hot as the sun would expand to a radius of 800 meters. Those near the blast destroyed. And we'll assume that virtually no one survives inside this area. Which based on population density, would start the death tally at 120,000 people. As you move further away from ground zero, estimating deaths becomes more complicated. From as far away as 11 kilometers, the radiant heat from the blast would be strong enough to cause third-degree burns on exposed skin. And as you get closer to the blast, the heat becomes so intense that clothing, even skin, would ignite into flames. That said, most people in the city would be indoors or otherwise sheltered from direct exposure. But the very structures that offered this protection would then become a cause of injury, as debris would move through buildings and rain down on city streets. As a rough estimate, we can assume that half the people between 2 and 11 kilometers from the blast are killed from burns, debris, smoke, collapsed buildings, and radiation sickness, which translates roughly into an additional 500,000 people. Many of these deaths will occur days, even weeks after the attack. Radiation sickness takes about a week to cause death. And much of the dust and ash produced from the explosion will be dangerously radioactive, especially if it originated near ground zero. And the distance the particles travel will depend on the wind and other factors. Now, since this simulation is of an airburst attack, it will produce significantly less radioactive fallout than ground attacks targeting missile silos or bunkers. So we'll go with a relatively small number of deaths outside the 11-kilometer range. If it were a surface blast, the fallout deaths could surpass all other deaths combined, but it's a very difficult number to predict. In theory, radiation deaths can be reduced if people can avoid exposure to the fallout, especially during the critical first few days. Fallout shelters were common during the Cold War, but people rarely build shelters today. And schools no longer practice nuclear war drills. We generally talk less about surviving a nuclear attack. And in a way, it's good that we're less afraid of the bomb now that the Cold War is over. When nations are less on edge, the risk of accidents is arguably reduced. But nuclear weapons remain one of the great threats to humanity. And today, we're entering a new era in nuclear weapon history. Long-standing nuclear arms treaties are being reassessed, and countries, big and small, face the prospect of new arms races. In part because technology is emerging that may give one side a considerable strategic advantage, notably hypersonic weapons. Current nuclear missiles travel around the Earth at high altitudes, making them visible by radar earlier in their flight. Now, some hypersonic vehicles travel close to the Earth, through the atmosphere, at least 5 times the speed of sound, giving defending countries far less time to react. Remember that some of the most perilous moments during the Cold War occurred when countries maneuvered to reduce their opponent's reaction time. And the less time countries have to react, the more likely an accident will occur, or a rash judgment. And then you have smaller nukes that blur the line between conventional and nuclear weapons, providing a more slippery path to nuclear escalation. Now, for ordinary citizens, nuclear weapon policy may seem like a complex, even intimidating topic. But leaders often consider public perceptions when making policy. In many countries, voter opinion is an important factor. Whether you believe nuclear weapons have made the world safer or more dangerous, both sides generally agree that the bomb brings an unparalleled risk, and that there are things we can do to reduce the risk, like minimizing how many countries get the bomb, or scaling back Cold War arsenals, or stabilizing technology races, or pledging to never be the first one to strike. Such ideas have often resulted in signed treaties, some of which have held for decades. Some are at risk of expiring, and some just need a final push to become activated. By being steadfast in these efforts and not walking away from diplomatic achievements, we can continue the work of ensuring that this nightmare simulation never becomes a reality. If you would like to learn about specific...
Can you imagine a meteorite hitting the planet during one of those Cold War heightened scenarios and both sides think it's a nuclear attack? It's not very good. Not looking to get radiated, so I won't be watching those. That's completely inaccurate. It's about 3 million years ago, I think, if I recall correctly, on what they'd see, and most of the continents would look almost exactly the same, and so on. yes, we hear about this, but it feels like to me like it's like you're intergalactic, and I hate to say this word because it's so politically like incorrect, but the intergalactic gypsies, not the governments, the traveling, bartering salesmen going from system to system and going like, "Ooh, we'll sell this worthless piece of junk to the civilization that they may end up killing themselves with, and we'll get like 100,000 tons of humans or something weird like that." It doesn't feel like it's the government of any alien group. It just seems like some alien randomly wandered into our solar system and went like, "Huh, we could sell something to that guy."
For dedicating some time to take him back into that very kind of uncomfortable place.
The other day at the office.
There's a widespread rumor in ufology circles that I've always been curious about. It's believed that President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed a peace treaty with an alien race in 1954 that might have allowed for human abductions. I mean, hey Calvin, how's it going?
Hey, good, man. Look, the reason I called you, there's something happened. Another witness has come forward. Seen it and all, described everything.
This is somebody who saw the event where you were fishing. You said there's a lady who saw something?
Absolutely. We have checked her out, and she is really a good, credible witness. Has held this in for a long time.
This is really great. Thank you for reaching out.
Oh, thank you.
Calvin just told me that a second witness turned up. Apparently a woman saw something he did. I can't wait to talk to her.
Ben was able to get in touch with the witness. Although she didn't want to appear on camera, she was willing to provide a recorded statement.
Hello? This is... I heard you were looking into the abduction case of 1973. On the night of October 11th, 1973, I was actually parked near the bank of the Pascagoula River with my husband. I was dropping him off at the docks where he worked as a fisherman. We both saw a blue light in the sky moving back and forth. I got out of the car, and I know this sounds crazy, but I saw something in the water. It looked like a person, but there was something different about it. I think it was an alien. What Calvin Parker described was exactly what I saw.
Didn't hear anything at the end with the song playing so loud.
Long day done? Hello, me time. This is the After Work Club. It's your space to do your thing. Where you can hang out, chill, or show off your many skills. Cheers to me time with the Lenovo tablet.
Uusi ilme. Uusi missio. Sama hieno maku. Olemme nyt Ben's Original.
The universe is incredibly big and seems full of potential for life, with billions of habitable planets. If an advanced civilization had the technology to travel between the stars at just 0.1% of the speed of light, it could colonize our galaxy in roughly 100 million years, which is not that long given the billions of years the Milky Way has existed. So, in principle, any spacefaring civilization should be able to spread rapidly over huge sectors of the galaxy. And yet, we see nothing, hear nothing. The universe seems empty, devoid of others. This is the Fermi paradox, which we've discussed in more detail in other videos. Confronted with the seemingly empty universe, humanity faces a dilemma. We desperately want to know if we are alone in the Milky Way. We want to call out and reveal ourselves to anyone watching, But that could be the last thing we ever do. Because maybe the universe is not empty. Maybe it's full of civilizations, but they are hiding from each other. Maybe the civilizations that attracted attention in the past were wiped away by invisible arrows. This is the Dark Forest solution to the Fermi paradox. The way of life. The hunter awakes in his hiding place and carefully listens for suspicious noises from the thick undergrowth before he gets up. Another night has passed without incident. The forest is dark and full of fog. He considers calling out to others to end his loneliness, but stops himself at the last moment. What if they are like him? All living things seek to survive, secure resources, and multiply. Their greatest obstacle are other living things that share the same objective. Competition between species favored the survival of beings with advantageous traits. Our ancestors were inventive, competitive, expansionist, and greedy for resources, which led them to winning the competition for our planet. Today, most other animals are so utterly at our mercy that we wipe out about a dozen species a day, just as an unintentional byproduct of how we like to run things. But humans are more than individuals. From us, cultures emerge that also compete with each other. Competitive and expansionary cultures spread faster and further and merge with, subdue, or destroy others. If we look at our history, it becomes clear we are dangerous. Not just to others, but also to ourselves. Our human nature has driven us to take over every corner of our planet, and soon we will look to the stars, both to expand our domain and ensure access to ever more resources. And then we might stumble upon others trying to do the same thing. It's likely that the competition of life also takes place on faraway planets, so it's logical to assume that an alien civilization
Feels like everybody's just trying to breathe with one another, even in space. And if we push our head out there and become noticed for who we are, we will be so tiny that because we can't be bred with, we'll be food. So once we reach a certain energy threshold, anything another civilization would do would be transferred to breeding energy, if you will. But if we go there too soon, it will be transformed into consuming energy. That is kind of like the sense that I get.
that came to dominate their planet would be in some regards similar to us. But if they're similar to us, they too may be dangerous. The implication. As the hunter sneaks through the dark forest all alone, he knows that there might be others like him. He can't know their intentions, if they are aggressive or not. The hunter knows he would kill to ensure his own survival, so he has to assume that they would too. And it might be that if he stumbles upon another hunter, the one that shoots first survives. None of this means that conflict is unavoidable. So far, the progress of the modern world seems to have made us more peaceful, not more violent. Maybe this is true for other civilizations too, that eventually progress means less conflict, not more. Different alien civilizations also should vary from the mild and peaceful to the malevolent and militaristic. The existential problem we're facing is that when we meet others between the stars, we have no way of telling who is peaceful or aggressive and what their true intentions are. Similarly, they might not understand or trust our intentions, even if we tell them that we are peaceful. On top of that, if we did discover another civilization and they discovered us, the light years between us would mean years of communication delay. Both sides would be in a state of uncertainty, wondering if the wisest move is to just attack, because there's another serious issue: technological explosions and the first strike advantage. We don't know where the limits of technology are, but we do know how much technological progress matters in war. A few hundred or thousand years can turn conflict with uncertain results into a one-sided massacre. Caesar's legions would stand no chance against Napoleon's army with their cannons and muskets, which would be eradicated by artillery from the First World War, which would not stand a chance against today's drones and guided missiles. So the power level of different civilizations may vary massively, and even if not, between the time it takes us to detect another civilization and us saying hi, we might already be hopelessly behind on the tech tree. Which is bad enough, but the nature of interstellar conflict makes this worse. If your opponent is light years away, sending an invasion fleet takes so long that by the time it arrives, it might be hopelessly obsolete. So war between civilizations might be just about eliminating the other to remove an existential threat to yourself. Someone else who might be so scared of you that they attack the first chance they get. In this environment, the only way to guarantee a win is to strike with such force and speed that the target has no chance of survival or time to counterattack or escape to seek revenge later. The stakes are the highest possible, with no room for error. If we assume that the majority of civilizations live on planets, that leaves them pretty vulnerable. All you need to do is throw something massive at a planet to make it uninhabitable. So the ultimate interplanetary annihilation weapon is probably something like a relativistic kill vehicle, a missile shot at a planet at a significant fraction of the speed of light. For example, a missile the size of a person going 95% the speed of light has as much energy as all nuclear bombs on Earth. If you shot a few dozen at the civilization you wanted to wipe out, success would be fairly certain. Even a single hit would suffice. This is not that absurd of an idea. A civilization only slightly above us on the Kardashev scale would have enough energy to send multiple strikes against every planet it suspects of harboring life. What makes these weapons so sinister is how much they favor a first strike, since they would be so fast that it might be impossible to protect yourself effectively against them once they're launched.
Long day done? Hello, me time. This is the After Work Club. It's your space to do your thing, where you can hang out, chill, or show off your many skills. Cheers to me time with a Lenovo tablet.
Just feel like if it's an actual alien government that we make a treaty with, not some random group of vagabonds that happen to have a few toys that we can use, but like an actual alien government, it would be similar to the landing in the North Americas, except it would happen at every native tribe at the same time. I don't feel like an alien government would be so small as to like land in the US or Moscow and just like trade like a ray gun for 1,000 tons of gold or something. It doesn't feel to me like what an alien government would do. So it feels like a family visiting a zoo and the child of the family going like, you want some peanuts, to a donkey, and the donkey thinking that it's from the humans. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel correct.
Between civilizations may not be lengthy affairs, but rapid winner-takes-all situations, where the first one to shoot wins. This makes any civilization an existential threat to any other. And if every civilization is an existential threat to every other, there may be only two kinds of civilizations out there. Quiet ones and dead ones. So, what should we do? Should we worry? It's unlikely that anybody has noticed humanity yet. The radio signals we've transmitted in the last 100 years are a relatively tiny distance and have long decayed into unreadable noise. At our technological stage, if we don't actively try to get noticed, and if nobody specifically looks at our pretty unremarkable solar system, we'll stay hidden. But one day we will venture into space in a serious way.
assuming an alien civilization has a way of detecting particle physics in that they scan the universe for high energy impact scenarios, which isn't inconceivable but a little unlikely. They would notice us because we're doing particle energy research, high energy research at that. And I would assume, even if it is a contained space, a explosion with the power of the Big Bang in a cup would be noticeable.
And need to consider these kinds of questions again. We don't know if there are others or if we are going through the forest alone. But we have no way of knowing for sure. For the time being, it seems the best we can do is to carefully listen. And even if we see others step into a clearing and make themselves known, we should not reply right away, but carefully watch them from the undergrowth. Perhaps we are also thinking about this all wrong by allowing our primitive brain that evolved in the context of the gruesome competition of life to conjure fears of predatory aliens all around us. Maybe the fact that we are looking at the universe like this, and that we are not grown up yet as a species. There could be a friendly, welcoming community of alien civilizations waiting to hear from us when we are ready. As for now, the good news is there is actually little we need to do. We just need to be thoughtful about the signals we send out into the galaxy. We need to watch the sky and learn more about our galaxy, our forest. Because whatever the nature of our forest is, full of danger.
It seems like if we're not able to admit to the existence of aliens on Earth, in that the groups of humans who are already on Earth that do not wish to self-identify as humans, if we're not willing to accept their word that they are not humans, then perhaps if we go out into space and we encounter a sentient being, we would have a filter that would make us believe it is something besides a sentient being. As it feels like to me.
Or nobody at all. Only careful observation can tell. So, let's do that. At last, the hunter reaches a clearing and finds a comfortable position. Slowly, the sun melts the fog away. Lost in thought, he admires the vegetation until suddenly he is eye to eye with another hunter, frozen in terror, just like himself. His mind is racing, considering all the different options. The hunter takes a deep breath and makes a decision. Maybe the only way out of the dark forest is to step into the clearing together. And with this hopeful picture, we say goodbye to the year 12,021 of the human era. It was a wild year, to say the least. Still,
I read and watched videos for many people who claim they saw aliens or UFOs here on planet Earth. And some of these people say that they have captured it on camera.
They know the precise orbital and invisible star. So where did the information come from? That's the serious mystery.
I can't tell you how electrifying it was.
People have increasingly over time lost their imagination.
I've seen plans in the archives. There is some reality there to the experimentation.
That's why I'll keep asking and searching.
I believe we would find aliens if we made it possible for people to self-identify as alien. I believe that would make aliens available, I think. I would say that the first way of making something appear is to give it paths into its appearance. So if we want to find aliens, we need to make a method on how the aliens can contact us. We need to be sure, and the method needs to be solid. Otherwise, they cannot contact us if we don't set out paths on how to contact us. If we just say over here, they might send something that we have no ability to understand, like a Oumuamua.
The Nazis may have been shooting rockets up.
You have to be open-minded. There is a mystery.
I think that the ancient Egyptians were pretty amazing.
Do aliens exist? And have they been visiting the Earth since ancient times?
I was born in Egypt, at the crossroads between two cultures, the Arab-Muslim culture and the ancient Egyptian history. Since I was young, I am fascinated by the ancient Egyptian monuments and their magnificent size. How did they manage to build such gigantic structures? Growing up, I learned that there are many theories which try to answer this question. But the theory which attracted me when I was younger is that it was constructed by the help of aliens from outer space. Then all the questions started. My family are all engineers and doctors. I chose to study economics, but at the same time I joined the theater and I became impressed by classics and mythology and the history of the ancient world. On one side I value science, and on the other side I have a passion for culture and stories. I was raised to use my brain and to be logical and ask questions. Many questions about everything. And when I get the answer, I find myself coming back with more questions. Like a mathematical exercise or an experiment in physics, it is the same for mysteries. They're all questions, and one has to look for answers. What is the relation between aliens and ancient cultures? In my search for an answer to this question, I found a book called Chariots of the Gods, written in the 60s by Eric van Daniken, who deciphers in it the drawings and legends of ancient cultures. His explanation claims that the gods in some of the ancient drawings are essentially aliens, who used to and still do come to visit the Earth, and that those aliens are the ones who taught humanity how to build civilization and to build gigantic structures such as the pyramid. I found this explanation in another book called The Serious Mystery by the American writer Robert Temple, which talks about the Dogon tribe in Mali, and especially about their advanced and precise astrophysical knowledge about a star that is invisible to the naked eye.
The tribe in Africa, in Mali, the Dogon, it cannot be chance that they know the precise orbital period of an invisible star. They draw pictures of the orbit and they know the orbital period. And so where did the information come from? That's the serious mystery. If you ask the Dogon where it came from, they say that their ancestors were given this information by visitors from the system of the star Sirius.
In my search for the truth behind the ancient astronaut theory, I found Lynn Picknett, who has a completely different point of view. Lynn Picknett is a writer and researcher in modern mysteries, whose extensive work tends to disagree with the ancient alien theories of Eric van Daniken and Robert Temple.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you for making the time.
My pleasure.
I wanted to talk to you about ancient astronauts. When did you first hear about that?
I can remember 1968. I was a young woman when everyone had to book Charity George first came out, and it was serialized in the Sunday newspapers where I live, well, in the UK, throughout the UK. And I can't tell you how electrifying it was. But very sadly, it progressed, and I started to go into the subject. You know, I just came to realise that very few, if any, of the examples that Von Däniken has given for his tobacco theory actually hold water, that they're actually true.
There are many books that followed it. It was almost like a trend. The concept became so popular that even Carl Sagan famously pondered about this too. Look at this. In the long litany of ancient astronaut archaeology, the cases of apparent interest have perfectly reasonable alternative explanations, or have been misreported, or are simple prevarications, hoaxes, and distortions, unquote.
First of all, I think Carl Sagan was the most remarkable person, and he was incredibly open-minded, especially for a scientist. But I think he's on the whole, he's right.
Okay, can you give us an example of a perfectly reasonable alternative explanation?
For example, the various little artifacts that are found in various places, but mainly in South America, which look for all the world, is quite right. They look exactly like modern aircraft, with the two wings and the bullet-like body and the tail. But when you discover that particular culture actually really revered certain types of insects and certain types of birds, and in fact these were representations of insects and birds, highly stylized, you know, but nevertheless that's what they were.
What about Robert Temple and Dogons, the mystery of Sirius A and Sirius B, the stars?
Nobody knows how the Dogon learned this. It is a genuine mystery, and it's very exciting, potentially. However, one should be perhaps guarded, shall I say, about accepting too much in Temple's book, just on face value, because some of the things that he says are actually just simply untrue.
Okay. Any other proof that it wasn't extraterrestrials that taught us how to build these magnificent ancient structures like the pyramids?
A lot of people do point to the burgeoning of pyramid building across the world, but actually it wasn't remotely at the same time. There's quite a long gap.
Who would be interested in an alternative version of our ancient history? And if it wasn't ancient astronauts, then how did our great ancestors develop their knowledge to such advanced levels?
The fact remains that there is a mystery. You know, I mean, I am open-minded. I'm not a skeptic about it. You know, you have to be open-minded. There is a mystery.
During World War II, several Allied pilots reported seeing flying objects of impossible speeds. It is said that the Nazis were very much into the occult and the paranormal. Actually, they were not the only ones investing and researching in these things. There were others doing it too. Eric Kurlander may have some insight. He has a PhD from Harvard University and is a professor in history specializing in Nazi history and Nazis' most obscure interests and developments.
Hi, Eric.
3+1 päivää Sokoksella, Emotionissa ja verkkokaupassa sos.fi. Torstain tarjouksena muun muassa
Hi, Eric. Thank you for talking to me. I wanted to discuss with you the Nazis and their possible connection to the UFO phenomenon. I'm happy to discuss it. It seems that the Nazis were very much into the UFOs, and coincidentally, at the same time, they were developing sophisticated aircraft and alternative propulsion systems.
I've seen plans in the archives of, they were really obsessed with how do we take down all these Allied planes coming over. So they were thinking about sophisticated anti-flak devices, the Kugelblitz and some other things. So there is some reality there to the experimentation. I'm arguing it just didn't work.
So experiments, not UFOs or aliens, and they're no amazing machines, superpower.
I haven't seen any evidence for that.
There was a crash of an unidentified object in the Black Forest in Germany sometime during World War II. And then in 1947, a similar crash happened in Roswell in the United States.
Supposedly those were weather balloons, right, at Roswell. I certainly don't think it was a UFO. Were they experimenting with something beyond weather balloons? It's possible. I haven't seen any evidence.
So could these crashes in Germany and the United States, only a few years apart, be just the transfer of technology rather than UFOs and aliens?
We know that some of the German scientists and some of the American scientists who worked with them were interested in these kinds of alternative propulsion. I mean, the whole rocket program was based on the idea that Nazis had come up with jet propulsion and other technologies that we hadn't yet mastered.
I can see how the public, if they see such objects, could easily believe they are UFOs.
Are these arguments accurate scientific deductions, or are they just the work of fertile imagination?
Maybe there's another explanation.
I'm not saying anyone is wrong. I just must be careful. Evidence that something took place is not a proof of how it happened.
Then you need to dig deeper. The question keeps buzzing in my head. And sometimes the answer is in the question itself, its motivations and reasons. Why does it have to be that aliens are the ones who helped the ancient civilizations? Why are we asking this question? I have to talk to Salima Ikram, Doctor of Egyptology at the American University in Cairo.
Hi, Salima. Considering your expertise on ancient cultures, I wanted to ask you, why is there an alternative version of our past, our great civilizations?
People can't get their head around the fact that human beings, without all the technology we have today, or even, say 80 years ago, could actually make something. Because it seems to me that people have increasingly over time lost their imagination and lost their faith in human beings. And also, though, it is true because, part of it, not everyone, but part of it is, those brown people or black people couldn't have possibly done this, could they? I mean, look at them now.
So it's not exactly ignorance, but rather racism?
Partially racism and partially ignorance, and also a desire for the fantastic.
Well, I'll leave you with debating this on your own, and I feel like I'll do some kind of gameplay later on today, so we might see something interesting, but that's about it. The moment they started discussing racism as, all these alien believers are just racist, it's just, again, with that stuff. So yeah, that's about it. I'll probably do some sort of gameplay today, but I can't promise it. Thank you for watching. Bye.